Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, May 2nd, and we will hear Mimi in the Cafeteria, reflections from school food planning practitioners. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your question in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to help you. For content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in that Q&A box, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. I will ask if your question is for a particular panelist. It helps me if you include the panelist's name in your question. So again, just type those questions out. We'll answer them at the end during the Q&A. Up on your screen is a list of our 2025 members. Thanks to all those participating members for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today, we have a collaboration going on. Public schools and is it community development? Is that what it is? Someone correct me.
It's public schools and communities.
Public schools and communities. Okay, and the food division. They are coming together to bring today's session, and you will learn a little bit more about both of those groups today, coming up in a few moments. So thanks for the collaboration and for bringing the session to us. On your screen is a list of our upcoming sessions for the rest of May. We're actually booking well into August now. And we'll have many more sessions available for you to register for here in the coming weeks. To register for these and all of our upcoming sessions, head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and you can register today. This session is worth 1.5 CM credits. To log those credits, if you are AICP and in need of credits, head over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search by today's title or the event number, both of which can be found on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, and of course, what's on tap for the week. We record all of our sessions and we post them on our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast, and we will pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified when a new session has been loaded and is ready to view. Lastly, new this year, we have an email list that you can join. I promise I send exactly one email a month to you, and all it is a list of the upcoming sessions that are available for you to register for. So if you're interested in getting that in your inbox once a month, you can click the QR code, or again, just head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and up at the top, you can enter in your email and I'll start sending you monthly emails. So that's the end of my housekeeping items. One more time, type your questions in the Q&A box. Make sure you include the panelist you'd like to answer the question, and we'll get to those at the end during the Q&A. With that, I am turning it over to you, Sarah Lee, to kick things off and make some introductions.
All right. Thank you very much, Christine. Welcome to everyone. It's great to have so many people here, and I appreciate that y'all are interested in food systems planning and particularly the relationship to our public school districts. I am the first chair and now immediate past chair of APA's newest division, Public Schools and Communities. We were approved in 2022. And Christine, I noticed that we are actually not listed on your sustaining members or whatever that was. So we have to get ourselves listed there.
No worries, I'll take care of it.
Okay. We're the little division that can. I want to take just a couple minutes to share who we are and what we do. We are the newest division. Those of us who have been in school planning for a while know that it is a field that is much broader than just siting new schools and/or creating safe routes to schools. So part of our mission is to create stronger linkages between the planning profession and public school districts to support and strengthen public education, as well as create stronger neighborhoods and communities. We do a lot of promoting content to our members, and we started our Lunch and Learns in 2021, and we have found that they are very, very successful as a way to deliver some meaningful content to our members. There's another piece of our mission that makes collaborating with other divisions like food systems important. And once we were approved as a division in 2022, one of the objectives we added to our work plan was to actually do lunch and learns with other divisions. And that is because in order for school planning to be integrated more holistically into community planning, we have to help get the general planning profession to understand just how many facets there are to school planning. And so this particular topic for today actually showcased itself, I think, to everyone during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I think what our communities found out, as well as other planners, was just how important the delivery of school meals is to the children within the United States. During the pandemic, we saw 30 million children, more than 30 million children received meals. And what became really critical was how to deliver those meals when in fact so many of our schools had closed. So that's kind of how this particular topic came about, and I am very pleased to see so much energy and enthusiasm for it, and want to thank the Food Systems Division for welcoming us and sharing. I'm happy to be here on behalf of Adam Lubinsky. He is our current chair and was unable to make it. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Food Systems. Megan Bucknam is going to represent Food Systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Lee. Couldn't find the mute. I appreciate it. Hi, I'm Megan Bucknam, and I am the professional and academic liaison for the American Planning Association's Food Systems Division, a division that was created to help planners build stronger, more just, equitable, and self-reliant local and regional food systems. Our efforts, like this webinar and our other division activities, strive to be a platform to help integrate principles of food systems planning into other areas of planning. Our group would love to expand our current membership and reach through welcoming new members and subscribers to our newsletter. We are also actively recruiting new leaders, so consider nominating yourself or someone you know for a leadership position. This nomination process is available now through May 9th. You can feel free to reach out to me with any questions or more information about how to join and just learn a little bit more about us by reaching out to my email that is listed on the screen. Food systems planners focus on the intersection between food and the built environment, ranging from farmland preservation to facilitating a range of food outlets that improve accessibility to nutritious and affordable food, from small format grocery stores to sidewalk vending to farmers markets and public markets. These land use-based examples represent part, but not all, of the strategies food systems planners leveraged to achieve the goals of creating market opportunities for regional producers and improving the food environments of all communities. Another strategy is regional procurement policy, the likes of which often take place in settings like this and is often overseen by professionals and practitioners like today's presenters. I am so excited to introduce to you the two folks that will be guiding us through this intersection between school food and food systems. And so you'll be hearing today from Lyndon Thayer, who is previously the Assistant Director of Food Systems Planning at Durham Public Schools in North Carolina, and Kaviki Kahiapu, who is the Farm to School Initiative Program Coordinator at Hawaii Farm to School Initiative. All right, I'm going to pass this off to Lyndon. Enjoy.
Right. Thank you, Megan. Give me a second to share my screen and then we'll get going. All right, can everyone see that all right?
Yep, looks good.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you all for having us today. My name is Lyndon Thayer, and today I'll be talking briefly about who I am, what I do, why planning is needed and missing from school food work, my particular work in Durham Public Schools and how we did what we did, and given everything we've learned, what next? So, like I said, I'm Lyndon Thayer, and I'm coming to you from Carborough, North Carolina, which is the historic home of the Eno and the Occaneechi people. And I've worn many hats in my career, but they've all focused on school food work, like this work with some of these kiddos here in this image. So I've been a nutrition educator, a food systems researcher, I've been a lunch lady, I've worked at 2 universities here in North Carolina. I've been the director of a small nutrition program in a rural community, and I co-founded something called Food Insight Group, or FIG for short, with my business partner Beth Katz, which is a consulting firm, and among many offerings, supports school food related research and evaluation. I've co-founded and continue to lead Upstream Works, which is a nonprofit fiscal sponsor agency that supports great community-rooted work, especially food work, at a sliding scale. I'm the former Assistant Director of Food Systems Planning with Durham Public Schools, and I'm currently the principal founder at My Assistance Design, which is a food systems planning and implementation consulting firm. And when I'm not talking food professionally, I'm growing food and cooking food with my teacher husband, a 6th grader, a 2nd grader, and a 6-year-old mini golden doodle, who may or may not pop up on the screen behind me at some point today. I believe deeply in what school food could be for students, staff, communities, and the planet. We'll get more into the whys soon enough, but I've been designing school food for almost 20 years. And it was only 3 years ago that Matthew Palmer, who some of you may know from the school planning division, told me that I was a planner at all. I had no idea that's what I'd been doing the whole time. So before we can talk about the why, I want to talk briefly about what school food is. So this slide is a very high-level overview of some of the larger nodes in the school food system. Everything from producers who can grow enough in volume to serve a school, to the aggregators and distributors who are going to move it around for us, to the kitchen staff who are going to produce that meal, however it's done, right? Whether the infamous microwave or whether it's scratch cooking, to the students, the eaters, and the environments they're eating in. And then all the way to the landfill, like how are we dealing with our waste? Is it going to a landfill, or is it going to a pig farm, or is it going to go to a commercial composter? And then back again. And of course, all of this school food work is happening not in a vacuum. So it's happening within the milieu of local, state, and federal policies and regulations. Just one example briefly, here in North Carolina, unlike most of our other states in the US, we have a requirement that our schools only accept fresh produce from a farm or institution that has been GAP certified. And GAP stands for Good Agricultural Practices. And it's basics like the farmer will wash their hands before harvesting, and they won't let animals into row crops that are actively growing. Nothing wrong with these rules, but like all certification programs, it requires time and training and money to certify each crop type each year. So you can imagine this is a big barrier to getting local food into North Carolina schools. So we can talk more about that as we go. But a note on the eater level, when I say school food, yes, it's all these pieces, and we're talking breakfast, we're talking lunch, we're talking snack, we're talking pre-K programs, we might be talking supper programs, teacher meal programs. School food covers a whole host of dining opportunities. And so when I say school food, I do talk about all of those different components, not just school lunch. All right, so why care about school food and why plan for it? I know I'm preaching to the choir here today. However, as a good friend of mine often says, right before a student can ever get down to learning, they and their family need to know that they can get to that school, they can have a good meal when they are there, and that there's a seat for them in a safe classroom environment to do that learning. Only then can we talk about geometry, French, or pointillism. So for me, the why we need to plan for school food topics break down into two categories. There's the practical, really that's operational. So if we don't plan for the infrastructure and the personnel to support school food operations, the best laid plans fall apart or, more likely, never happen in the first place. And then on the personal side, we're talking things like student health and well-being. We're talking academic success and better behavior, all of which are linked to healthy school food programs. Not to mention that higher up in the hierarchy, we're talking local food procurement is really reinvesting in local economies. For every dollar invested, we get $3 back, give or take. And designing conscientious school food programs can have outsized impact on our planet's health and our planet's future, because agriculture is one of the largest contributors to the climate crisis. And so what schools do or don't serve has an impact on climate health in a way that individual choices really never can, right? So if I change one item on the Durham Public School food menu, that's instantly 15,000 meals that were changed and adjusted. Whereas if I make the same change at home, that's 4. So we're talking big scale with schools. So I'm putting it out there that this is my personal belief that school food procurement and school food programs should drive our return and our collective move towards regenerative, interconnected regional food systems. And sure, other institutions are welcome to come along and be involved, local government, hospitals, higher education, everyone's welcome. But for me, school food should be at the epicenter of this change because of how far those positive impacts, how far reaching those can be, particularly for our students and our kids who are the future. I'm sure y'all are familiar with some of that data that I hearkened to earlier, right? Positive outcomes for academic success, lower dropout rates, better behavior outcomes, health and nutrition benefits. But we're talking 4.8 billion lunches rather, just billion lunches alone served annually in these school food situations, and millions of children who are relying daily on schools for their primary caloric intake. In North Carolina alone, we're number 7 in the country for number of meals served to students in schools, and we're in the top 10 for agricultural producers. So this is my bias, and it's a bias, but I think North Carolina should be leading the way on doing this school food work. So I'd wager that a good number of folks on this call would agree with things that I'm saying, and that school food should be some of the most nourishing food that we produce in this country. And as planners and systems thinkers, you might also agree that institutional food procurement, like that done through schools, could have dramatic impacts for our food systems, which is all well and good. But how do you practically shift school food programs beleaguered by federal nutrition regulations, hamstrung by limited funding, crippled by aging infrastructure, and weighed down by stigma and sidelined by auxiliary services that are misunderstood or not understood well at all by school boards and administrators? Well, our answer in North Carolina was to just try something new. What I'm going to talk about for the remainder of my time here was an experiment that we ran in Durham Public Schools, which is a school system of about 31,000 students in the central region of North Carolina. It has a variety of schools. We have urban schools. Some of our outlying schools in that district are situated in rural zones. So it's got a good mix of folks, really interesting demographics. And what we did was to embed a planner, particularly a food systems planner, within the school system to take on some of this work. And it came about in part because the pandemic provided some additional funding as we were moving out of the pandemic and back into classrooms. There was already a planner embedded in the school district, Matthew Palmer, who saw the need for additional planning support for food programs. And so through a series of events, we got together and decided that we were going to design something new. And in this role, we were going to particularly address the fact that everyone traditionally involved in school food programming is overworked and overstretched. And they're not against nourishing children well, they're not against sourcing local, they're not against protecting the planet. There just isn't enough, there are not enough hours in the day. So within this role, we did a number of things. And I've listed a bunch here, but I'm only going to highlight a few, and we can certainly come back to more later on. Once I was in this position for 2.5 years, we managed to do a variety of things. But first and foremost, I want to talk, I'm going to pause for a second because I think I glitched. All right, I think I'm back. So CEP stands for Community Eligibility Provision. And you may be more familiar with this as universal meals or school meals for all. Whatever the title, the end result is that all students receive breakfast and lunch free of charge, regardless of family income, no paperwork needed. And this last bit is especially important right now during times when families don't feel safe sharing personal information with schools or government agencies. CEP was important for us as a first step in planning towards the future of school food because it reduced stigma, it removed administrative burden, and it paved the way to increase participation, which is the backbone of increasing funding for school food. Getting to CEP took a coalition and repeated education in a variety of settings for school leadership, for school boards, for county leadership and families. We really had to understand the motivations behind everyone's hesitation before we could move the ball to the end zone and achieve CEP across the district, which we did. And I'll speak briefly here because our next guest is going to talk a lot about youth engagement. But I do need to brag that we had a Youth Food Policy Council in Durham for 8th through 12th graders. We did a variety of things, everything from training to surveys to peer engagement, to teaching them to speak before the school board, to conducting oral histories with school food staff. And just one example, but just 2 weeks ago, some students from that group went and spoke in front of the Durham Public School Board to talk about their concerns around the school food program. And then 1 week ago, a farmer vendor who had been selling to the schools but had lost the contract in this early spring 2025 when the schools were concerned about the loss of federal funding for farm to school. When that farmer went back to have a conversation, not only did they regain the contract and renegotiated terms for the next school year, but the director cited the students speaking at that school board meeting as one of the reasons that they felt pressure to re-engage and not drop the local food work that had been built. So that was just a fabulous advocacy, youth advocacy to action happening in real time just in the last few weeks. And I'm so proud of those students. All right, so we did things like, speaking of regional procurement, move the needle pretty far on local sourcing. We, in order to get there, had to do a variety of things, right, to build towards what nobody's disagreeing with. Everybody would love to buy local, but how to make it happen in the real world. So we started by rewriting procurement documents to preference local and regional, as well as historically marginalized producers. We developed new recipes and menus that incorporated North Carolina product and followed this seasonal calendar. And we also had to balance things like budget, right? So if we bring in a local product that's a slightly more pricey, we paired it with a canned corn. If I brought in local chorizo from a woman-owned farm business, then we also served canned beans as a protein another day of the week. So we did all of that work to make sure that we could do what we wanted to do. We had to upskill our staff with basic culinary training. And I will state for the record here that that was probably the most challenging piece that continues to require the most support going forward to make happen. We piloted regional procurement in the first year with mid-sized producers who we knew could handle bumps in the road. We were very careful not to engage with our smaller farmer counterparts that first year, because we knew that as a district, we would make mistakes in building that infrastructure and putting it all into place. Everything from delayed payments to changing delivery locations to changing how and when we ordered. So once we figured that out, then we felt that we wouldn't jeopardize smaller farmer businesses. And so in that second year, that's when we provided training for a whole variety of local producers and aggregators to teach them how to engage with the procurement system that is a school district. Because it's not easy, right? There's 60-page documents. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of insurance requirements, that GAP certification that I talked about earlier. So we did training sessions to teach them how to do it so that they could become viable vendors for us going forward. And it worked. In 2.5 years, we tripled the amount of local product that we brought into the schools. And we went from having sort of a token, the third Thursday of every month being the local day, to having local on the menu weekly, almost daily, and really integrating it into the program. The last bucket I'll talk about here today, for now, is sort of kitchen planning and facilities assessments. So several schools had already been planned and or were already under construction when I arrived 2.5 years ago. And we discovered that those school kitchens were being built using pretty outdated standards, just because nobody had had the time or bandwidth to remember to ask, should we change things? And let alone design kitchen standards for the future of school food that we were planning toward. And so, you know, as a team, we wrote those legs and we wrote those facilities requirements into existence so that future building and future renovation work would reflect what we need in order to do, you know, to reflect our values in the school food program. So these are just some images from some of the work we've done. In that top left corner, that was an oral history being done with actually a retiree from our school nutrition program, which really was a lovely way to engage students and staff in learning about who are these lunch ladies. They are three-dimensional characters with full lives, and you know, sort of bridge that gap between the back of the house in school kitchens and all the people participating in it. And it was a really lovely experience that we got to share in a variety of ways over the course of the year that the students did that work. We had local days like NC Crunch, we did staff culinary training, and then below we've got some of our local vendor partners. So in Durham, we planned and designed a lot of things in just 2.5 years. Implementation and evaluation are always the biggest challenge if you've got someone with the time to plan in the first place. So some things worked and some things didn't, and not all the changes were implemented with fidelity. And evaluation was always the thing that got dropped when there was too much to do and not enough time in the day to do it. But we do have some ideas of what worked well, what didn't, and what we would do differently going forward. And even though I had to leave the district in January of this year, I do have some thoughts on, you know, sort of the what next and what could be done not just in North Carolina, but elsewhere. So the first thing I'll say is that I do believe strongly that individual champions for change are vital for school food planning at all levels. We need individual students and families engaged. We need school boards and superintendents to commit. And even though somebody doing the school food planning is really important, I don't think after this experience that it needs to be at each district level. I think there's some regional work that can be done and done really well instead of reinventing the wheel in each place. So even though what we do in food planning especially is very regionally specific, think about cultural relevant foods, think about particular geographies and what's available produce-wise, for example, the planning approach for school food design is similar. So I do see a need for school food planning everywhere. I think we can just support districts in doing that work from regional nodes. And my recommendations for what next would include working on the missing middle infrastructure. So even 10 years ago, North Carolina did not have good aggregators, distributors to handle local food products, regional food products. And that has started to change, but that's not true everywhere. So if you're in a region that has that missing middle problem, that is an important place to address first. Recipe menu and culinary development is missing in most districts, and that wheel does not need to be reinvented. That is work that can be done anywhere and shared broadly. I think school food programs typically also need communication support. When you need to talk about what the fabulous things that you're doing in your school food program, having that communications help is another missing component, as well as advocacy training for those who want to speak up but don't have the advocacy skills to sort of make the case. I think we need to continue to educate school leadership rather, about how school food works and how it could work, because that visioning is often missing. We have 80 years of historically ignoring students and the staff who work in our school food programs in the design process. And so I think they need to be centered for sustainable change, because they're the ones who are going to be the end user customer and the folks that are going to be making that happen day to day. I also believe that given current funding models, some form of a hub or a regional or a central kitchen approach is one of the only ways that we're going to be able to do values aligned school food programs like scratch cooking and local sourcing. Funding is a different issue, but given what we've got now, I think that's where we need to go. And I do think that schools and cities and counties and regions have a lot of overlapping values, and also those vague notions of how to achieve those goals of, say, economic development, climate crisis response, and public health work. And I think a lot of it can be actionized in a very real way through school food programs. And the last thing that I'll say is that there is uncertainty at the federal level around school food and school food funding right now, which is why now is the time to be making plans and planning the programs that we want, instead of trying to tweak these old programs that have really only been serving big ag and big food this whole time. So I think we have a wide open opportunity to do those things differently and to try something new. And with that, I will leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to turn over the floor to Kavika, all the way on the other side of the country.
Hello, Kako. Let me get my slideshow up and running. Is that working? Can everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
I can't. Okay. Aloha kako. My name is Kavika Kahiapo. I am in Hawaii, and this is my presentation, Hawaii Youth Food Council as a catalyst for systemic change. Just to take a step back. So I am employed by the Hawaii Public Health Institute. I am the Hawaii Farm to School Network Program Coordinator. And I was hired specifically to be the Hawaii Youth Food Council advisor. My role has changed since I first got started, but let me tell you a little bit about my network and where I'm working. So the Hawaii Farm to School Network is spanned across 5 islands. We have 5 individual networks that combine to make our statewide network. This work was started in 2010 and became a member of the High Five team organization in 2017. And again, that's Hawaii Public Health Institute. We have over 40 plus partners spanning across the network, all volunteers. I am the only paid staff member for this organization. And we work in working circle groups. So we have split our organization one by topic. So we have a legend policy circle, a curriculum PD circle, my Hawaii Food Council, and then those different circles, but also island networks that we work with that combine with those different circles, trying to create a bigger synergy in the different subgroups we work within. So like all good farm to school programs, we work with a core elements of farm to school, looking at agriculture, nutrition education, making sure that we have local school food, and then that we have school garden and farms involved in that education process. This is where it gets exciting for me. This is where I thrive, and what's really interesting to me. The Hawaii Youth Food Council. It was founded back in 2019, launched in 2020. And the mission is to engage youth in policy and system change efforts that result in a just and equitable local food system for a healthier Hawaii. The vision is we envision a Hawaii where youth are engaged and empowered in creating healthy local local food systems that instill a sense of place and purpose in connection with the INA. So for me, I actually stepped into the role that I'm playing now back in last June. And it's been a little bit of an interesting turnaround. The annual planning for this should have started in an April or May setting to catch the end of the school year and to really ramp it up. But my Hawaii Food Council I work with high school students from across the state, all the different high schools. Students are eligible to be a part of it. And I teach them the legislative process through a hands-on INA steward food system lens. So teaching them where their food comes from and really why it's important to know where their food is coming from. When I first got the council, I inherited 5 members from 2 different island sets. In the last 10 months, I've grown it to 16 members, including 4 different island sets. I focus on 4 areas. One is community service, getting them out there in the community, working with community partners, actually putting in service to the INA to make sure that they're understanding, but it's also connecting to the partners that are most connected to the issues that they're having to deal with. I give them paneling opportunities. So this picture up here on the top left is one of the first panels that I put together. This was done 3 years ago at Transforming Hawaii Food System Summit together. And it was a combination of both high school and college age students that are looking or interested in the agriculture industry or food systems realm, and really just kind of getting them to be able to talk about these topics. We teach the legislative process. And if you look at the top right corner on my screen, at least, I have the youth council members actually doing a presentation to a group where they teach them the legislative process, how a bill becomes, what a bill is, how to read a bill, the process a bill goes through, how to generate personal testimony, and really how to be an advocate there. And then we have a We Grow event planning that we also participate in. This is a bigger annual event. It changes every year, just depending on the council members, what their interests are. And we've had to go through COVID. So when we started the youth council was during the COVID period time. So a lot of our startup was done on Zoom type of meetings. So we would get food systems subject matter experts to come together and discuss these issues on a Zoom setting for the first couple of years. Then we moved into a more in-person place where we do both a day at the state capitol, actually having the youth go through and advocate to the legislative personnel. And then we also have a sorry, I heard a reverb and it kind of made my brain stop. Just trying to get them or to understand what it is that we're dealing with in the legislative process. So again, to reiterate, I bring them in and I give them education in food system issues, really understanding the problems that understanding problems leads to being able to create better solutions. Teach them the education. I educate them in the legislative process, helping to understand in which government rules and regulations are created. Teach them the civic engagement, hoping that they understand that each individual voice matters, that the roles of state and city officials, the importance of voting in these politicians that give voice to their constituents. And then creating connections between these youth leaders, making sure they understand the importance of INA or land stewardship, and then also connecting them to the legislative decision makers. One of the biggest things that I found is that the legislation, they stop for youth voices. I've actually seen them where they're playing on their phone in a committee hearing, and then when the youth steps up and starts to speak, they are able to actually put down their phone, take off their glasses, and actually listen. Whereas the rest of the hearing, they are just playing on their phone. I bring these things up, and I might have probably should have brought this up a little bit earlier. Hawaii has a very unique landscape. We have a very isolated location. We're smack dab in the middle of Pacific Ocean. We are heavily dependent on imports. 85, depending on what report and how recent your numbers are, someplace between 85 to 95% of our produce is imported in. That makes it really hard, not just for school planning, but for all type of food planning in general. We have one centralized Department of Education. That means there is absolutely no competition in the state. This one's body has all say and all body power for our DOE or our public education. Then when you get into it, the really nitty gritty is there is a deep-seated colonization issues. Depending who you talk to in what mindset you're at, we are still considered an illegally occupied state by the U.S. government. We have deep-rooted cultural identification issues. Again, our language was basically illegalized. A lot of our customs that we were actually supposed to promote, we're not allowed to do. And so that actually cuts off ties to our agricultural knowledge and investment. Pre-contact, Hawaii was able to, and again, we had someplace between 300 to 1 million people before contact, and we were able to independently provide food for all of those people with being isolated here in the Middle Pacific. Another big issue that we've been dealing with, and I know that other areas are too, but wildfire recovery. We had the big fires in Lahaina 2023, August, and we're still going through how to figure out recovering and planning and really opening our eyes to that issue of emergency preparedness. So to combat this, we have a very strong focus on our ledge and policy priorities. As I stepped into my role as Hawaii Food Counselor in June of 2024, in December, I had the boss who hired me actually had to step down, and he was going to be doing the ledge and policy work. I stepped in to be doing that as well, so I held a dual role at this point of being the lead advocate for the Hawaii Farm to School network, and also using or utilizing, activating the youth into this type of work environment as well. And so as we cross through here, I was given 5, 6 different policy priority areas for the Hawaii Farm to School network. Again, at its peak, at opening day, I had 16 youth members. Each one of them opted or would choose to study and follow a specific bill throughout the entire legislation process. The idea here is the more understanding that they have in working with that ledge process, the easier it will be for them to work within and change processes and government levels through advocacy. Some of the policies that we focused on and that the youth council members focused on this year was UH CTAR positions. This is our UH Manoa college level positions. We were looking and asking for a permanent P through 20 ag educator, and then to take 2 of our extension agent positions from a temporary position to make it and turn them into permanent positions. Again, we have one Department of Education overseeing the entire state of Hawaii. Currently, our Hawaii Child Nutrition Program sits inside that Department of Education. One of the bills that we push for very strongly is to move HCMP out of DOE and into our DOA, Department of Ag. The big reason is to create those checks and balances. HCMP is supposed to be our regulating arm for the USDA and the grants and fundings for school lunches. What we found is, as long as they are in the DOE and they have a complaint, they go to their boss, who is also superintendent of all DOE, If for some reason he doesn't like what they're saying or doesn't agree with the USDA, or excuse me, the HCMP complaint, it's very easy for them to sweep it under the rug and then not become onto public knowledge. Having CHCMP outside would allow greater regulations and again, checks and balances. The next bill that we worked on was a food systems working group bill, bringing together different private and state institutions to work together and really discuss overall food system planning here in Hawaii. Again, with 85 to 95% of our food being imported in, having people making a plan on getting us from where we are today to increase local food productions is super important. We had Acts 175 and 176, two bills. Act 175 is state legislation that requires us, the state of Hawaii, to increase local food production in school cafeteria meals to 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. Acts 176 does something similar, but not but for the other state institutions, hospitals, jail systems, and the combining alignment of those metric systems, making sure that we're hitting 30% again by 2030, 40% by 2040. It just should make everybody, so all the different institutions work together in a kind of synergy. But I also like this bill specifically because I think it'll create some sort of competition, friendly competition between the different institutions, helping to increase local production quicker. And then my pride this year, DOE procurement, HB 1293, we put together and asked to have local, to have exempt purchases for the DOE increase from their budget was previously 25,000. We asked for 100,000. It got increased to 250,000. What that means to us on a local level, we had this last 2024, about a year ago, last school year, we had put out a bid or a request for schools to participate in a local food drive. We had about 86 schools that signed up. However, because of the procurement limitations, our poi, which is a staple food here in Hawaii, was not able to be purchased for all the schools that wanted to. We had enough funding for about 37 schools, the island of Kauai, to get covered, and then the rest of the state went without that poi for the rest of that school year. So as we bring these youth groups into these spaces, we try to team them up and educate them on different learning opportunities. If you look at the top left corner, this is one of our We Grow events. We had a 2-day series. The goal of this 2-day series was to connect our Lahaina students. So we actually did a field trip out to that Lahaina space on another island where the fires were heaviest. And had discussions out there, saw the recovery work that they're going through, and really discussed and learned a lot about what the locals in that space are going through and the issues that they're having to deal with. One of the largest issues being water right access. If in that picture, you can see over to the right-hand side that you can start to see the hotels. Those hotels have been granted access to water with before the local people can get access to it. The pumps actually run specifically for the hotels. What most people don't know is Lahaina is the original royal capital for the state of Hawaii. We took cultural values and connected the royal state, the old ancient royal capital, to the state capital today. This here on the bottom picture is a picture of Iolani Palace. Again, this Iolani Palace is right next door to our state capitol, which you see in the upper right-hand corner. And so we're connecting all these different spaces through a cultural lens, understanding where food systems and why food production is important here in Hawaii. The big issues that they were talking about in this space was if for some reason the ship shut down, we truly have maybe 2 to 3 days worth of food for the residents only on the island of Oahu. The other islands would be left to fend for themselves, in making sure that the food they would be able to find food. So to increase local production and just overall would be super important for Hawaii's environmental preparedness or emergency preparedness, excuse me. But that is the bulk of my presentation, I believe. Again, my name, Hawaii Public Health Institute, Hawaii Farm to School Network, and Hawaii Youth Food Council.
Thank you, Kavika. Thank you, Lyndon. Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Reardon. I'm the chair of the Food Systems Division, and I am joined by Nani. Nani, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Nani Katsapolo. I'm an associate and urban planner at WXY Studio and have been co-organizing this panel with Molly.
So we're going to invite Kavika and Lyndon to come back on video if they're able. And we've got a couple of questions for you to get the Q&A started. And we'll invite others to join the Q&A as well. So you can use that Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. You all have been in these before. You know what you're doing. So I thought I'd just get it out there right away so we can have a conversation about it. Like, for those folks who are not involved in schools, are not involved in food, but are planners, why should they care? Why should planners care about schools and food? Lyndon, you talked a little bit about this, but this is an open question for both of you.
Sure, I can start. I'm so biased, but right, we don't have many community centers left, and schools are really it in most places. So whether you're a city planner working on, street design, or whether you're a food planner working on sort of more regional work, schools, if you don't include the schools, you're missing a huge piece of it. Both the application now, right, getting whatever the work is you're trying to get done now, but also because it's an opportunity to engage and educate those future planners to care now about, what they might do in the future.
And Kavika, what about you? What would you say to planners who aren't involved in this? What would make you say you gotta pay attention?
I mean, to be an effective planner, you need information, any type of, and all information available to make the best decisions. And so while we can focus and plan the best we have, we can only do it the best to the amount of knowledge that we have available to us. Again, collecting more knowledge, being a part and participating in more things gives us that true authentic experience into having an understanding of those knowledges and the decisions we're making.
As I was hearing y'all share out, you spoke a lot, Kavika, especially on your end of like the importance of young people being involved, and Lyndon, to your point of like the recent advocacy work and being able to get certain farmers back onto the sort of Durham procurement roster. But I guess I'm curious what other stakeholders or folks in your community have been really important as in, building relationships with? Because something, Lyndon, you and I go way back. We like one of the main things that we like worked on together that really started our connection was during the pandemic of building out that sort of meal support program that was like connecting with local restaurateurs to build out meals for students. And there was hundreds of volunteers that drove out the meals to students in Durham. So I guess, yeah, I'm curious, both Lyndon and Kavika, if there are how sort of community has played a role within your work and who else has been like really key to being able to get that position within Durham Public Schools, for the first time ever. And Kavika, within your role, like doing a lot of working with young people around sort of legislative processes. I'm curious, like who on the legislative side has been really key to being involved, but maybe I can pass it to Lyndon first and then Kavika, you can go after.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about connections, right? So for this role, I mean, another piece of it was that prior to the pandemic, we had brought together 5 different groups to do work around what would it look like to build pub kitchens for the schools that also served as models for community work. And so that was a a private practice organization, it was Duke University, it was an insurance company, it was the city, it was the county, and it was the schools. And we made them all come to the table and have this conversation about school food. And that was probably the first time some of those folks had been engaged in that work. And so they were primed. We got into the pandemic work, like Nani was saying, we taught restaurants to serve 80,000 meals a week on behalf of the schools, because the schools went from 300 staff to exactly one left standing. And so we did some great work there, but then coming out of it, everyone was a little more primed, a little more prepped to at least temporarily think that, that today is National School Lunch Hero Day, by the way. So to think about all those school lunch heroes and to do something about it. So I think it was a unique opportunity. It's unfortunate that it's not top of mind for everyone all the time, the way it is for those of us who live this world. But I think having as many of those stakeholders at the table is what made it happen in Durham. And then going forward, just continuing to build those networks of folks from across all sorts of places. So, for example, I had a parent very concerned about vegan work and promoting plant-based options. And she reached out to me. I told her I needed to get CEP done, and she became one of our biggest champions for getting free meals for all. And I said, once we do that, then we can think about the next layer, like build towards all these other things you want to talk about. So she became a feisty person, in there at the school board meeting, speaking up on behalf of something she knew nothing about to begin with. But we made the connection over food and then moved forward together. And I'll stop there and hand it to Kavika.
I think one of the most important groups that often get overlooked is teachers, especially when working with youth. Having their buy-in is super important. I mean, they're the first line of defense, or the first people working with the youth, on a regular basis. Having them introduce and be or used to talking about the connecting to their food sources, I believe is really important. I've been finding that, especially here in Hawaii, we need to do that younger and younger. Understanding the importance. I mean, I've heard ridiculous stories of people thinking, or the youth thinking, that carrots grow on trees, apples can be dug out of the ground, all these different things. But actually knowing where our food comes from will help to, and understanding what it takes to grow this food will give us true value of what that food should cost, not what we're paying for in the stores, but what it really takes to grow. I'm a big believer that a disconnect between values has happened, especially in America overall. There is nothing like in other countries where they have a religious or some sort of value system that they actually all are able to be based a baseline off of where they're living. America does not have that. I believe that we should create ours around food. All of us eat, all of us enjoy putting food in our mouth and that consumption. The more of us that know where our food is coming from and have a connection to food, in actuality, to create that connection to each other, means that we're all eating together. The other side of that too is really bringing in those legislators, having the youth create individual personal connections to these leaders, making sure that they understand that as they get older, again, these are high school and younger youth, so they're not necessarily able to vote yet, but their testimony can definitely be heard. And then if they understand the importance of why these legislators voted in personnel are important in making decisions, they'll be able to make sure that when they're of voting age, they're putting in their leaders that are listening to the constituents, and not people there for mass payouts or whatever it is, government work that is not getting done what we want. I'll stop there.
Can I just add, to build off something Kavika just said, that I think we've just done this naturally here today, but we've talked about school food, and historically folks have talked about child nutrition or child food programs. And for me, it is about teachers, and it's the staff in those buildings, and it's the families who could be participating in those fabulous meal programs for only $4 or $5 a day. School food could be something really big, and it's very much more encompassing than what it used to be called, which was child nutrition. So I think that language matters as folks are moving forward and thinking about how they might engage.
We have a lot of questions for you. I did want to pause to see, Christine, if you wanted to lift anything up from the Q&A, and then we can always go back to Nani's and my questions.
Let's do that. the first question is, and this is a me question. And again, folks, if you have questions, type them in that Q&A box and we'll get to them. So this question is, and I've heard of this before. I have a friend in the public health realm, and she deals specifically with food insecurity. And I hear about this all the time. What happens to kids on breaks? Christmas, holiday breaks, summer breaks. Are there programs with the schools to assist them with meals on the weekends, during summer break, during winter break? How does that work? Did I stump everybody? No. You're like, well.
Sure. Well, there's what the programs are and then how they function. So there is a summer food service program. There's something called seamless summer options where schools can extend service just sort of seamlessly across the summer. That same seamless summer option allows you to feed during, if you have year-round schools on intersession break, and to a certain extent on days off for other reasons. There are other programs like the CACFP program, Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, another federal group, that allows for supper meals and some other out of mealtime services. And it depends on where you are, and I want to hear about Hawaii, but in North Carolina, in the summer, we reach about, in Durham specifically in North Carolina, we reach about 10% of eligible kids in the summer, and that's a really good number. So what we do in the summer is not good enough, and we've been struggling with it since the pandemic. The pandemic allowed for something, getting a little nitty gritty for a second, but allowed for us to serve students without having to congregate them, to have congregative meals. So we could deliver it to a doorstep. We could deliver it to the family member who would take it home to the kid to use. And that worked great. And now we're back, except for rural communities, we're back to having to watch the kid eat it in a location that we've designated. And that really hinders our ability to serve students wherever they happen to be in out of school times.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah. It tends to be a lot easier to them when they are in school and at a single location. Although we did in Hawaii learn to actually move meals to a distribution system where people can come and pick it up and then eat it at home, or to make their own food boxes type of situation. I don't have numbers per se, but we do have two programs, Poi for Pepe, which is another program that takes and actually delivers home to ECE students' homes kind of thing and shares it with their parents. And then we also have a Kau for Keiki program that we run in the summers, and that's hit up on 3 or 4 different islands, I believe, Molokai, Kauai, Maui, and Oahu, where they actually are able to give out food boxes every week for students who are able to sign up for the program. Again, I do not know the number of how many families that we actually affect with those boxes, but it is a major effort that another group that I work with is part of.
Great. I have a couple more questions, and then you can jump back in and ask more of the group. So this one is, could you expand a little, and I think this one's for Lyndon, on what is considered missing middle infrastructure?
Absolutely. Yeah. Lingo. I get into trouble all the time. So there are farmers and there are school kitchens, and somewhere in between, food either comes raw to the school kitchen or it goes to a manufacturer for processing in some kind, right? Becomes tomato sauce and gets to you. And so that missing middle infrastructure, particularly when we're thinking about local and regional procurement, is often missing. So like Cisco's and US Foods, right? They've figured out how to do it. But local folks, right? Farmer Jane, right over here to my left, may have great product. But getting me her carrots, either in the raw form or turning those carrots into carrot coins and then getting them to me in the schools, takes some extra infrastructure. And that's usually what's missing for more local regional work. And so it's growing in different ways in different places. And we've got some interesting models here in North Carolina, but I know from colleagues across the country that a lot of the time that's what's missing. It's not that Farmer Jane doesn't exist or doesn't want to serve the schools. It's getting Farmer Jane's product in a way that they can use in the schools to the schools most efficiently.
I would jump in here too to maybe point to Kavika too and say, you would think that Hawaii as a series of islands would have a much easier way of getting food grown locally into schools, but that's not necessarily the case.
Not at all. Sorry, we do have what's it called? A couple of different options that we're looking at as we try to create new laws and stuff. We have one group that's really interested in creating these regional kitchens, which would be then help to set up with local small farms to bring their produce to be able to process. But it oftentimes we refer to it as a Zippy's model. It's meals already ready to eat, kind of frozen sometimes. We have Zippy's is a popular mom and pop's food place that has grown up, and they have a lot of local favorites. They produce and have they actually just opened their first restaurants in Las Vegas within the last year or two. This is something that we've been following. Anyways, their process of storing food, getting it cooked, and out to the different restaurants is something that the state is looking at using as a model for school foods. There is people on both sides of the debate whether we should keep scratch kitchens, especially for emergency preparedness issue here in Hawaii, making sure that we have spaces in local communities to cook foods. But I also think these regional kitchens can be good to help us get into the processing. One of the big things, like Lyndon was talking, is that middle infrastructure, able to these raw produce, because we can grow stuff, but make it into secondary products, value added products and stuff to make sure that we have mayonnaise and salad dressings, which don't come so easily to us or for the storage side. There was one other thing I mentioned, but I can't think, wanted to mention, but I can't think what it is right now.
Boy, do I understand that. Thank you. So next question is there any organized effort to advocate for continued federal funding? And we're going to talk money now for the next couple questions, because that was bound to come up. Federal funding for FRL and CEP programs. And I had to Google that because I didn't know. And FRL is free and reduced price lunch, which makes sense. And CEP is community eligibility provision. Did I get that right? Because you type in CEP food and you still come up with a whole lot of options. Okay, so federal funding for that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the question was, are there groups advocating for sort of high level, both just the National School Lunch Programs in general, and then also for the community eligibility provisions? And I'll just name two at the federal level. There are lots, and then others should chime in too. So one is FRAC, so the Food Research Action Center. I think I got that right. So they are a great outfit to just keep up to date on what's happening in the funding and the policy world around school food. And Center for Science and the Public Interest does some of that work. And then there is a lot at the state level. So in our state, and it will be called something different everywhere, but in our state, we have the North Carolina School Meals for All Collaborative. So two options, but I know this panel has lots of other stat.
I will say also, given that there is some threat to CEP being an option across the country, some of the organizations that Lyndon mentioned, along with a lot of other regional organizations, are looking at continuing to gather stories about why CEP is community eligibility provision, free school meals for all, is such a benefit, not just to students, but to the school's ability to function as a meal providing agency, and to the community. And so some of that may bubble up in your jurisdictions as well. Kavika, I may have cut you off. I apologize.
No worries. I just found out that I was already unmuted. But what I found is that so we had a bill that we were looking at, and we have a no child left behind hunger act type of group, healthy eating, active living, that has really taken a champion's role in the universal free school meals. Sorry. We did not get our top universal free school meal bill passed this legislative session, but we did actually get a big win where we have the the reduced cost people, the Alice families that are already getting some sort of assistance. They are going to be able to, they are now free school meals eligible, and they're continuing to bring those programs up so that we have more funding to help all kids. The last thing that we need is, in fact, as I go and I start talking to the youth and we start recruiting, one of the easiest discussions that we have is, do you think school meals should be free? Are you ever hungry in school? And we're so quick to talk, and we do all these studies to show that plants do best when given optimal nutrition levels. And that's all we're trying to do, is make sure that kids, these youth, are getting to eat optimally, and that way they're functioning properly.
Let's take this a step further. Could you talk about how you fund your initiatives outside of federal funding? Who else is around? You know, as planners, we do a lot of contingency planning, and you know, we think about what avenues we might be faced with in the near future. And I think we can all agree that this type of federal funding can very easily be on the chopping block. So, how do we pivot? What do we do to pivot? Who are the other players? Who are the other partners that we can turn to in either federally or, you know, within our states, our regions? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Vicky, you want to go first this time, or you want me to do it?
Sure, no. So I believe, well, for us, we have a lot of the funding for my program comes from the state. Again, wanting to spend and make sure that we're really investing in our youth and creating programs that can help build and create the leadership in depth that we need so that they're around for the next couple generations. One of the things, especially as we are indigenous nation here, kind of thing, that we often, or at least I often talk about with the leaderships people in leadership roles that I've spoken to, is that traditionally, when making decisions, our councils, Kapuna councils, they would make these decisions not just for today, but for 7 generations. So that when we're creating this depth, it's not about trying to figure out what's best for us all now today, but what's best for the world in general, and what's not going to hurt the environment and all, making sure that we have access. But yeah, so to answer the question at hand, I'll be working with and our state departments, our state institutions, and private foundations here. Being smack dab in the middle of the island, I think making sure that these institutions know that we are in this together, and if we want to increase local production for the state, that we have to kind of share the resources that we have available to us, make sure we're maximizing that, and that be by reinvesting in our local agriculture so that the small farms are able to create that local produce. Again, getting a revamping of an economic basis. We can grow the food here. It's just how much is it valued?
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And I'll add, the original National School Lunch Act in the 40s intended for it to be federal, state, and local funding, all supporting school meals. And at least in North Carolina, we're one of 8 states that forgot about the state part. And we do a tiny bit for breakfast, but we don't do any extra for lunch, which is unusual. Most states do something. So part of it is, yeah, educating our state level folks. They should have skin in the game, and local folks to a certain extent too. So we do need it happening at all levels. And then getting creative too is the other thing that I would add. So I think we have a missed opportunity in serving our staff, for example, and that's a place for us to create revenue while also generating, you know, examples for students. Oh, look, you know, Miss Nancy is eating lunch too, and she likes to get this salad bowl, and that's cool. And so we get a lot of benefits from those staff participating, not just their dollars, but yes, their dollars, and also student participation. I think there's room to become more of that community center and to create, we only use these kitchens for 6 hours a day, give or take, which is really underutilizing them. So what else could we do? Could we create family meals, sell them at sliding scale? Again, both to subsidize the program that needs additional funding, but also to support our community in a different way.
I want to just jump in on that thought, if that's okay. There's some really great opportunities to partner with your local governments. To Lyndon's point about our kitchens, our cafeterias, yes, a lot of the equipment that is in the kitchens has been purchased through our federal funds, our Schoolway Cafe, that's what we call it down here. And there can be some restrictions. However, we have found ways to partner with particularly our local governments who like to provide summer camps. There was an earlier question about how do we help these families, these children during winter break, spring break, and summer camp. We can do that with some joint use of our facilities, with some sharing of the refrigerator, the freezer, and there are some state and local monies made available, whether through specific programs or community development block grant monies that have just trickled down. You can leverage those monies with what the kinds of things that Lyndon and Kavika are making known, and make that go further and still serve children and families in the same way that we're doing. So yeah, some creativity, but there are still some resources. We know it's a changing environment, but I think organizations like all of what we represent have to remember, don't leave lobbying up to just, the specific professional associations.
So knowing, and then we'll kind of, one more question, and then we can pivot back to some of the questions that you all had. Knowing generally who I have on the line with me, I would suspect that many of them are saying, geez, I'm a planner, either a public planner, private planner, nonprofit, whatever it might be. I consider myself a planner. And I think that food is very important. I think that sustainably grown food, and how far it takes for food, to get to me and kids and schools, and it's all very important, and I'm here for it. And that's why I'm on this webinar. But I don't know how to incorporate that into my daily work as a planner, because A, I don't have any money to do it. B, I don't really know where to start. And C, I don't have any time. So are there any tips or tricks or thoughts about that particular planner that might be on the line right now, thinking this is all well and good, but I don't even know how to incorporate that when I don't even know how to incorporate it in my day-to-day as a planner. What are some thoughts on that? I know it's a big question. That's a big question. I should have given it to you earlier so you knew.
I want to say something about that, and Lyndon referred to this in some of her work. Obviously it depends what level are you at within your organization. Do you have the ability to influence internally, but also consider your ability to influence externally? Lyndon gave us an example of a mom, I think it was a parent anyway, who was interested in vegan meals. And, Lyndon's like, yeah, important, but I need help with A, B, and C. I think it was CEP, before I can get to working on vegan. Don't forget about your role as a planner and your ability to influence, not only internally, but externally, because especially right now, the environment that we are all living in right now, our external stakeholders can have a huge influence, oftentimes more so than we can. What we need are people advocating for the things that we already know are important, but people other than ourselves can be as influential and setting the path so that we can now walk down it. So I would suggest that one of the things you look at is your external stakeholder groups, what kinds of conversations you're having with them, who are the movers and shakers, and try to, find those who care about certain issues and use them.
I think too, Molly, can I say something or do you want to go first?
Please go. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think too, some of those more, let's say, traditional planners, if you will, I think there are just so many ways that folks on the call can just keep doing what they're doing with food in mind. And what I mean by that is, if you're in land use preservation, all of this hinges on there being food, on there being land to grow food upon. If you are a freight planner, all of this hinges on ensuring that land uses are compatible with all of the different missing middle pieces or the existing middle pieces. None of this can happen in a very small vacuum that is not connected with every single land use decision that so many of us on this call study or are in the process of making or just, suggesting. And then lastly, again, with the same theme of leaning into your plannerness, if there's a comprehensive plan, if an MPO is setting priorities, these are great little avenues from which to include regional procurement for all institutions, emphasis on schools. This is a great way of including things around youth engagement. So again, just like doing your piece of planning, but start thinking about how it connects to the regional food system, of which there are a lot of very tangible pieces, like the actual food or going to a farm. And then there are so many other pieces that we might take for granted, like ensuring that large vehicles can move about a community safely, and all sorts of things like that. So be the great planner that you are.
Wonderful. Do you want to field a couple additional questions with our 5 minutes that we have left?
That sounds great.
You go ahead and ask some. You're good.
Great.
Yeah.
I think, well, maybe one question for our panelists as you're signing off and giving and I didn't prep you for this, so I apologize. As you're signing off and you're saying, okay, there have been 200 people on this call and we're thrilled that you all were able to join us. Do you have any parting words or like things that you want planners to keep in mind from your perspectives, having done the work that you've done? What should the folks that have been here today keep in mind as they're moving forward in their planning roles?
I mean, this is thematic of what we've been talking about, but if you do one thing, like invite somebody from that school food systems network to a something, right? Whether it's the director of the school food program, or if you have a youth food policy council bringing the students in, or some of the farmers who want to or are serving schools, chances are they're connected, right? So just bringing one player from that whole web into your world to come to an important meeting about a master plan or something may start the ball rolling. But silos are real and in all of our spaces, but I think school food in particular is really good at like just hunkering down and going and ignoring everybody else and also being forgotten. It goes both ways. So yeah, invite us out of our shell.
My recommendation is to start small, find somebody new, ask them to go out to lunch, hang out, have a meal, try to make sure it's something that's locally procured, something that is important and indigenous to the space. break bread with them, have that conversation, talk to them about the importance of knowing where your food comes from and the true value of food, and making them understand that while doing it every day can be difficult, but maybe once a week, choosing to make smart purchases and put your vote towards local stuff so that we are building our local economies.
Amazing. Thank you. Lyndon Thayer, thank you so much for being here. Kavika Kayapo, thank you so much for being here. Kavika, reminder, everyone is on Hawaii time, so it's real early there, so extra snaps for that. I want to thank Sarah Lee and Megan and Nani for joining us. I want to just close by sharing one thing real quick. And I apologize because now I'm gonna have to be that person who's like holding us up, not knowing how to share her screen, but let's just get there. To the question, let's see if this shows up okay. Yes. To the question of, how do I fit this in? This is my favorite cartoon when I think about food systems planning. Any cocktail can be a shrimp cocktail if you set your mind to it and you carry loose shrimp in your pocket. Any planning job can be a food systems planning job if you have food on your mind, to Megan's point. And so, we've heard a lot today about some of the different ways that we are going to be thinking about food going forward. We've talked about community eligibility and the fact that if it goes away, it could really strap our schools and also strap their resources for other things that they want to do, like capital improvement projects. So these are things that might touch some of you all too. We didn't touch on urban agriculture today, and that's okay, but just to be aware that this is another place where planners are getting a lot of questions about their role and how they can support urban agriculture, and schools and school farms are a great place of intersection. So there's some opportunity to think about that interconnectivity there. And then finally, we are not done with our crises, right? We know that there are going to be acute and long-term challenges ahead, and schools are community resilience hubs already. And as the daughter of a self-described lunch lady, she would remind you that they've got a lot of expertise, and if you ask them how to feed a lot of people, they're going to tell you. So anyways, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining our two divisions. It's been a real pleasure to be in this conversation today. And Christine, thank you to APA Ohio for hosting all of us today.
This was so much fun. What a great conversation. And I just love these like sort of planning adjacent topics from your traditional planning perspective, because I could very easily say, I feel like that everyone is a planner. And, there's always the age old saying that, you're a planner. Oh, well, what kind? There's like 500 different types of planners out there. And I just love bringing in all of these different perspectives. So, that our transportation planners can, get their fill of food planning and school planning. And this is why we do this. So thank you all for joining us. Folks, don't forget to log your CM credits. A recording will be up on YouTube. Make sure that you register for upcoming sessions on our website, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And that's what I've got. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll talk next time. Bye-bye.